The votes are in. Ohio State has its captains, and it also has somebody new to wear the Blocko. Welcome back to the Podcast Daily. It is Monday. We are inside 2 weeks until the season opener. Another scrimmage is in the books, and afterwards, Ohio State on Saturday in the Horseshoe gave out some honors, and they have a group of 4 captains. That is Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. There's just 3 of us, but we'll talk about 4 Buckeyes now. Bill, the group of captains. Any surprises for you? Let's name them off. Emeka Egbuka, Cody Simon, Travion Henderson, and Jack Sawyer.
No surprises. The question for me was how many they would have. I was going back through like 3 last year. I think sort of fluctuated between like 6 and 7 in previous years under Ryan Day. So like this felt like a year where that number could really maybe shoot up a little bit. It only goes up 1 from 3 to 4. So if you're picking 4, those would probably be the 4 that I would assume. Maybe you throw a Denzel Burke in there, but I think all 4 guys are deserving, and I'm not surprised at all that those 4 were the guys who got the most votes, I'm assuming, by their teammates. I'm not exactly sure how the tabulations work. I would imagine there were probably a couple other guys who received multiple votes for that spot, but I think it does make sense to like not have a million captains. I think you want that to mean something, right? So if you keep watering it down by naming a dozen guys captain every year, I think over time that loses its effect. So I'm good with stretching it to 4. I think these 4 make sense.
They do. I'm still a little surprised. I'm not going to be honest. I'm not going to be honest. I'm going to be honest.
He's going to lie.
I am a little surprised that Travion Henderson is a captain, not for any reason other than he doesn't oftentimes. He doesn't appear to be the most like outwardly vocal guy on the team, and kind of keeps to himself. And the running back room is so small that you wonder sometimes how much of an impact that room has on the rest of the offense. But clearly, the willingness that he showed to be a team player when they brought in Quinshon Judkins, the role he played in helping James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon after Tony Alford left, the role that he took on when Tony Alford left, and just stepping up and really keeping things in that room copacetic, I think goes a long way. I'm a little surprised that Will Howard is not a captain, just because I think that there's such value in having a quarterback be a captain, and he's clearly come in and done all the right things and led the team and getting to be a real valuable part of the team. And I know sometimes with incoming transfers, maybe there's not enough time for that, but it seemed like from what we've seen from Will, that he has put in the work to get that, but I guess there is some value in longevity inside of the program.
In terms of like, setting an example, positive influence, Travion, I think, gets way more credit for that inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center and in the locker room for Ohio State than maybe he does outside. There were 2 guys that were always like the first one to go through the line for those first 4 practices in training camp, talking to fans, signing autographs, interacting with kids. One was Will Howard, who you mentioned there, Berm. Like sometimes the guy who gets the starting quarterback nod has done the job to win over a captaincy and a leadership role in the team. And there will be one for him within the offense, of course, but the other is Travion Henderson. So he's done all those things. I think he checks all those boxes. I would say I was a little bit surprised that he was still among those 4, even though I recognize those things that I just mentioned. But the problem is I think you want to have balance between offense and defense, and we don't know what the ballots looked like, but let's just assume that there were spots to put 1 or 2 offensive players and 1 or 2 defensive players. Then that means guys like Denzel Burke or Lathan Ransom or JT Tuimoloau or even Tyleik Williams, we're not going to be able to squeeze in there because they may have wanted some balance. I don't know that for sure. I've never seen the ballot. I don't know how they do it. They might have more than 1 spot. Last year, I guess that you could only vote for 1 person, which is how they wound up with 3 captains when they were the most obvious ones on the team. So maybe I should find out more. But until then, I'll just have to speculate wildly and say that it was just because they wanted to get to 2 and 2.
Yeah, but if you look there, you can go position by position and make a valid argument for most players on the team, or a player at each position. Obviously, a quarterback, not even just Will Howard, but Devin Brown. I know might be a little bit funky to have the backup quarterback.
That's happened before.
Yeah, it has happened. I mean, it happened in 2016. So anything can happen, or 2015. Sorry. But Josh Fry,
great.
Yeah, that season turned out excellent. Josh Fryer is a guy, obviously Denzel Burke, Lathan Ransom. I mean, you can go position by, especially on defense, because it's just so chock full of veterans. So I don't know. It's hard to argue with any of these guys, and I think we had all been somewhat taken aback at the impact that we've discovered that Cody Simon has made on the team in the last month and a half, because he's not a guy that was really celebrated quite as much as everyone else when it came to who was returning, but clearly he's the heart and soul of the team, and that's why he was named the Black O.
Has a guy ever so quietly risen to that position on the team before? Usually it's quite obvious that someone who is held in such high esteem by his teammates would be a candidate for Black O. And I'm not suggesting any way that Cody is undeserving. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And I was not expecting it at all, at any point in the offseason, really, until Big Ten Media Days.
Well, yeah, that was the crazy thing. I mean, it was a month ago when we were in Indianapolis, and Austin and I were talking to the players, and I was sort of just expecting everyone to be like, oh, Jack Sawyer is going to be the guy. And then they're like, nope, Cody Simon. I'm like, whoa, okay. And to hear that not only from the defensive players, because it was Denzel Burke who said it first, and then Emeka Egbuka echoed it. I was like, oh, that is unexpected.
They said his name immediately and unequivocally. And up until that point, in mid-June, I was like, well, Jack Sawyer seems like the no-brainer. He's the one who rallied the troops here to have everybody come back, even if they made their decisions independently and separately. They still came together collectively. He was speaking after the Cotton Bowl. He sort of set the tone. And then I thought, what? Wait a minute. The guy who actually did it first didn't make any kind of announcement whatsoever. And Cody Simon was just like, hey, yeah, I'm coming back. You guys didn't know that? I decided that 2 weeks ago. I'm going to be there. So actually that had happened even previous to Jack Sawyer's stuff. And I'm not taking anything away from Jack Sawyer's candidacy, because I thought that he had a really strong one, or we wouldn't have talked about him all the way up through June. But the way that Ohio State, the teammates and the coaching staff have talked about Cody Simon, gives you a very different appreciation, or gives me a very different appreciation for what his standard is, his work ethic is, the way that his voice carries in the locker room than I really knew existed. And I've talked very fondly of Cody Simon for a long time, and the adversity he's faced and the way that he's battled throughout his career to come back from when it looked like it was going to be smooth sailing and multi-year starting role for him, and it didn't work out that way. I knew he was going to be really important on the field, but it seems like underestimated how important he is in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, if you combine this honor that he got with the way that his teammates have talked about him, and the way that James Laurinaitis talked about him from a football standpoint, the ability to play both, probably all three linebacker positions in the defense, and just sort of not having to worry about him. This is a pretty veteran team, so there are, I think, a few adults in the room, but I think Cody Simon is the adultiest adult in the room, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He seems like the guy that's got his stuff most on point all the time. And that is probably something that's a little hard to notice unless you're in the Woody every day. That there have been, I think, very obvious candidates for this. And there's more than one way to kind of go about your business. But I think just the way that Cody chooses to do his, which is very much under the radar, is what made this so surprising. But I guess he kind of can't now. I am interested in that. Not that Cody's ever been afraid to speak his mind, and I've always really enjoyed talking to him. I think he's pretty candid when we do, but he's not high up on the list of guys that I would say would maybe call people to account when necessary. And I wonder if he might do some more of that now publicly, that he holds this position on the team.
Do you guys mind if I read something? This was from December 20th, 2019. Okay.
Ooh.
That's quite a ways back. One of my
found this quickly.
Because I remembered it snapped in my brain.
Was that signing day?
It was signing day. One of my favorite stories to write is the class superlatives. And most likely to become president of the United States, Cody Simon was my pick. And I said the potential primary battle between Cody Simon and Court Williams would be very interesting. But if these young linebackers decided to team up, there would be no limit to what they could achieve. Simon is incredibly intelligent, thoughtful, precise with words and actions. There aren't many wasted moments in his future, and football career at Ohio State will just be one of the many things he accomplishes. I think I nailed it.
So you're
so-
also saying that they're definitely in the same political party. That's a great way to preface that.
or they're crossing streams. You never know.
which can be beautiful. Yeah.
I can't believe
didn't
I
Ryan
didn't edit
Day-
that. I can't believe I didn't edit that part out. It was too political.
I
Didn't
wanted
Ryan Day call Cody Simon a captain like on that day? Didn't he say Cody's a future captain, or they said it about Court? I can't remember. I think one of the two guys.
I
don't know,
believe he
but
said that about. I think he said Court is like already a captain when he
Okay.
arrived.
in that same story. I want to be. Well, do you guys mind if I read something? In that same story, most likely to become an Ohio State captain, Court Williams.
That
And then
happened.
Ryan Day said, "I'll be surprised if he's not a captain when he's here. I've said that to him and his parents a million times. They're probably tired of hearing me say that." Court Williams did not become a captain. Oh, he did become a
Yes,
captain.
he
He was a
did.
captain last year, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ryan Day was right as well. Everyone just backpats all around.
Do well.
It's great.
No, he wasn't last year. Wasn't he 2 years ago? Last year
Yeah,
it was
2 years
just Xavier, Tommy Eichenberg, and Cade Stover.
But he made it. That's what's
He
important.
did make it. No, I just wanted to fact checked in real time. That's what we're doing on this show. Do you think if Court hadn't medically retired, that he would have earned the block O?
Yeah, maybe he was the guy that I kind of always had in mind because there have been different ways to get this, as I said before, but one of them is to just kind of persevere through the worst medical setbacks you can have as a football player, and Court has certainly tried to do that throughout his career. So I think that would have garnered him a lot of support for the block O. I do think you want to give it to some. I think the same thing with captainships. Like you want to give it to guys who I think are going to have an impact on the field, and I don't mean that in any kind of disrespectful way to Court. Again, I think it goes back to like the meaningfulness of the honor itself. But I think for that guy to have the most tangible impact, I think you want players on the field to be able to look to their left or their right or whatever and like see that guy out there with them when the moments get toughest. So I think it's hard to give it to a guy who has medically retired, but prior to that, if Court was going to have any kind of role in this team, I think he would have been a really good candidate.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly is a player that made an impact at Ohio State without really doing one on the field. But I think we've seen outside of Cameron Babb, I mean, the goal has always been to kind of give it to someone that was going to be a leader on the field as well. So, either way, pretty good choices. My 2020 class superlatives piece was a banger, by the way.
What else is in there? Well, did you get everything right?
Let's see. I had most likely position group to end up on a T-shirt, which was the wide receivers. With biggest positional head-to-head win was Julian Fleming. Let's see. Most likely to play early for Ohio State. I picked Ryan Watts. So that one. Now he did start.
Well,
as
he
a
did
freshman.
play early,
He
but
did start
then
as a
he left
freshman
just
and
as
Started
quickly.
like a Minnesota game, right?
Got that one right.
Biggest sleeper in the 2020 class, Mitchell Melton, is who I picked there.
Oh,
Receiver most likely to go off on Michigan as a freshman, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I had a pretty good.
he would have.
That would have been a sight to behold. Berm, it's interesting that you bring up recruiting class superlatives because this was a key weekend on the recruiting trail for the Buckeyes, and it did not go that well.
No, it didn't. That's our show.
That's the end.
No,
You said this was coming. I just want you tried to preface this for everyone that
Well, I
David
tried
Sanders
to. I
was
tried to say
trending
like this felt like it was turning the wrong way. And I think the interesting thing. So we're talking about David Sanders, 5-star offensive tackle from Charlotte, who ended up committing to Tennessee on Saturday. Unbelievably, did you see, Bill, how he accidentally leaked his own commitment before he?
Oh no, I missed that. How did he do that?
On his website, he the committed shirt to Tennessee. They accidentally sent it live. They put that live like an hour and a half ahead of time, so people were able to screen grab it. So all the
was he still selling the hoodie with him in the Ohio State jersey after he
Yeah.
committed?
yeah.
Wow.
throwing clearance now.
Yeah. No, obviously, there are so many people having so many discussions about David Sanders' commitment and what it means and how Ohio State should react and what Justin Fry's role is and how Ohio State should handle Justin Fry in the future. Like, I'm trying to be measured as I say this, but there has to be a middle ground here. Yes, Ohio State needs to offer more players or have better relationships with players if they haven't offered them, so that if they do offer late, that they don't feel like they're trailing so far behind. The problem is not that David Sanders is like going to Tennessee. The problem is there isn't somebody that you can replace him with. But the reality is he's a 5-star, like generational type offensive line prospect, like a Paris Johnson type, where you can almost pencil him in as a first-round pick in 3 years, no matter where he went to school. There aren't guys out there to replace guys like that. So it doesn't matter to me, like, how many other guys they've offered at tackle, because they certainly have offered. The problem is they haven't gotten any of them out of the state, and that is a concern. So if there's a lack of articulation by Justin Fry in Ohio State about what the Ohio State development plan is, or what the offensive line is doing to be successful, like, I think that's an area where Ohio State is going to need to make some adjustments. But I don't necessarily believe that they're making a mistake by offering less players than other people, because I don't think that offering plan B or plan C type prospects much earlier in the cycle is going to matter if you're still not going after them as hard as you are. Like, telling a kid, hey, you have an offer, and then we're not going to talk to you for 6 months while we chase David Sanders. Like, I don't think that makes a difference. Do you? Does anybody?
No,
probably not. And I don't know, like, I've seen a lot of the, like, Georgia's offered this many guys and Alabama's offered this many guys. And I think it's probably generally true that you want to cast a wider net than what Ohio State has done at offensive line. Although it does feel like Ohio State operates that way at most positions. Berm, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they do seem fairly selective, and like Tim Walton gets results for it. So it's not like it's a losing formula sort of inherently, but it certainly is on the offensive line. It hasn't worked out for them. And I don't need, like, I don't know what the argument is, like, oh, if we offer more, like, eventually we'll land one. Like, maybe, but I don't know that that's a guarantee. I don't know that I want to give a guy who's batting 100, 500 more bats to see if he can hit 200, right? I think he might still keep hitting 100. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a solution either. I just don't know what the disconnect is. It is.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild to me that, they can rewrite the script of recruiting at quarterback. They can rewrite it at receiver. James Laurinaitis seems like he's doing it at linebacker, and they cannot do it on the offensive line. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
And
it's not a Justin Fry specific issue. This happened with Greg Studrara. It happened with Ed Warner. Ohio State's offered 172 players in the class of 2025. Georgia's offered 280. So it's not just a offensive line philosophy that's any different. It's across the board, as you said. I think it's the important thing to note. Yeah, Alabama has offered 230. So they've offered 50 more players in Ohio State. The problem is that Alabama is getting their top targets on the offensive line, and Ohio State's not. Like, so it doesn't matter. It's not like they're offering 50 offensive linemen and then taking the 48th one they offer. They're getting the guys that they want at the top, and Ohio State's not. So the question is, why are they not getting the guys at the top? And that is something that they're going to have to figure out. And some of it is just purely demographics. I really do believe, and it sounds like, scarlet and gray colored glasses or whatever, or an excuse. If David Sanders lived in Pittsburgh, I think he would have been going to Ohio State. He, from the very start, the conversation around him, and something we saw in quotes from him and his mom multiple times, was that they wanted to be somewhere close to home for college. And even though Knoxville is a 4-hour drive, that's still a much shorter trip than it is to Ohio State. And when you have a new house in Knoxville that you can send your whole family to for the week, or like, those little things made the difference. Ohio State did not get beat because they weren't willing to invest the money or spend money, because they certainly were. Like, David Sanders on Saturday said it was always Tennessee. They were always in front. That's what he said. I'm not sure that I believe that. I think there was certainly a time when Ohio State had taken some momentum in that recruitment, but when he didn't commit at the end of June, like, that was a problem right then. Like, when it's like, okay, you took your official visit, you get the final OV, and then I'll talk to everyone in 2.5 months. Like, that's oh crap, that's not how it's going to work out. But it's not good. But the point is, how many guys you offer don't matter, because you're missing your top ones, and you don't want to see Ohio State offering 2- and 3-star type players on the offensive line just to say they offered guys. That's silly to me.
It feels like the comparison that is not so much about Alabama and Georgia. When we've had, I don't know, conversations with texters or on the message boards, it's like, well, Penn State has what? They've offered 89 offensive linemen or something like that. I don't know what the exact number is, but a lot more than Ohio State. They're spreading a wide net. The problem with throwing out a wide net is that there's going to be some fish in there that you simply don't want. And it cheapens the value of the offers that you have made to the best players. I think you would want to make sure that you've left no stone unturned and put the highest premium on the guys that you want. And if that doesn't work out, Ohio State still has a strong enough brand and cachet to get other players and flip them from other schools, or take on some other development prospects who've been in the state of Ohio who would want the opportunity to play for the Buckeyes more than anything. I'm not suggesting that that is a silver bullet or a solution to putting together the kind of offensive line that Ohio State actually needs. But the other part of this is like, well, if they're willing to spend $1.5 million, why can't they just offer that to the next best player in the country? I don't think that that's a great allocation of resources, because David Sanders may have been the exception to this rule. If he is Paris Johnson caliber, maybe he could have started in year one. That still didn't really happen on a consistent basis or in a way that Ohio State.
Yeah, Paris didn't start as a freshman. I mean,
didn't need. Yeah, you don't want that to happen, and it's very rare that it is ever going to happen. So, if they thought that he was worth that amount of money, so be it. Can't argue with that. But I think in terms of 2025, if you have $1.5 million that you're going to allocate to any offensive lineman, that either needs to go to someone like Josh Simmons or someone in the transfer portal who can start for year one. So I'm not thinking that that's a solution to this either. And all of these things we're bringing up are like, I don't know, we're not actually solving the ongoing issue, which is what you both mentioned. Ohio State is not getting the very best players that it wants on the recruiting board for the offensive line, and we don't know why.
Yeah, I mean that. So I want to bring up 2 points. Number one, about the NIL stuff. Okay, like I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the NIL money works. There's not a pile of $1.5 million sitting on a table that has David Sanders' name on it with a sticky note. Okay, and they're like, oh well, David's not here, so we're going to take this money. The way this works is this is what it's going to take to get player A, and then the collective folks are like, okay, we'll get it taken care of somehow before now and the time he gets there. They're not sitting in a back room. It's not Walter White laying on a bed of money. Like it's not, they don't just have it sitting around. Like it's not that way. Number two, Michigan has won the Joe Moore Award, 2 of the last 3 years, right? Is that correct? They just won a national championship. They are known as a offensive line developing program. They've offered 44 offensive linemen in the class of 2025. They have 2 commitments. One is from Avery Gatch, who is from right down the road in Michigan. The other is from Caden Strayhorn, whose family is all from Detroit. Like, this is not just an Ohio State problem. It is a Big Ten problem that is continuing to be exacerbated and perhaps highlighted, because if Ohio State is still having this problem, then it is someone else around the league has to figure out how to get these offensive linemen from around the country to go away. Michigan is very much in the thick of things for Andrew Bobola, who's another 5-star offensive tackle, but there's no guarantee they're going to get him. And he's from Kansas. So like, it's not like there's a lot of, I mean, he could go anywhere he wants, I guess, but it might be Stanford or Michigan. He's a high academic kid. So like, I don't think that this is an issue that's just an Ohio State issue. Even Michigan, with all of the success they've had on the offensive line, with all of the belief out there that they are the place to go and be developed as an offensive line group, and under Sharon Moore and how good, they've been playing, like they're still struggling. So something has to give in the Big Ten. I mean, Penn State does a nice job, but again, it's kids from Pennsylvania. The best player in Pennsylvania, the best offensive lineman in Pennsylvania, Michael Carroll, is going to Alabama. Like, this is a Big Ten problem. It's not. We care about Ohio State. We cover Ohio State, and I understand people believe Ohio State shouldn't have the same struggles that the rest of the league does, but this is a Big Ten problem, and somehow they have to overcome that. Hopefully, as the league continues to grow and get better and we see more Big Ten teams in the playoff, these kids around the country will realize that all the talk about you have to go to the SEC to be developed is BS, and you'll start to see changes. But, if you go back through the last decade, Donovan Jackson was recruited by Greg Studrara, but his family was all from Ohio. Like, Wyatt Davis picked Ohio State because of Urban Meyer. Nick Petit-Frere picked Ohio State because of Greg Schiano. It was not because of Greg Studrara. Like there's not been an offensive line coach at Ohio State in the last 15 years that you look at and be like, oh, that guy's absolutely killing it as a recruiter, because it's just not
the
happening.
truth is most offensive line coaches are not charismatic recruiters. Like that's
you need
sort
to
of
have a large base, right? You need to have a large base of guys in your back in your neck of the woods, so you can easily say, we're going to develop you. You're going to come here. You're going to be. These kids don't want attention. Offensive linemen are not drama queens. They're not divas. Like it's not the same as recruiting other positions for a number of reasons. And it's not to make an excuse for Justin Fry. I completely agree that the Buckeyes have to readjust something in what they're doing. I just don't know what it is, because it doesn't seem like anything that they do seems to matter. Micah DeBose, the offensive lineman from Alabama, who's from Cleveland originally, like, they thought, hey, we're going to get this kid up for his official visit in June. They did. It was June 14th. We really like him. This is trending in the right direction. The next weekend, he has an official visit to Alabama and commits before he even goes on the trip. Like, you just don't know what these kids are thinking. Henry Fanuco, the offensive lineman from Missouri, he takes his official visit to Ohio State, says he wants to wait, doesn't want to make any decisions right away. Next week, commits to Missouri before he goes on his visit there. Like, it's weird. I don't understand exactly how that's transpiring and exactly why it's been such a struggle. But I get personally like annoyed, and maybe it doesn't matter if I'm annoyed, but like at the notion that Justin Fry isn't trying, because I know that he is, because I know what the Buckeyes' efforts are, but it is just not connecting. So if there's a problem in articulating what they can do for offensive linemen, that's what I think the biggest issue is. So someone needs to get better at selling that message, because if David Sanders and his family truly believes that Tennessee has a better track record of developing offensive linemen than Ohio State, I don't know how you win that, because that is just flat out not accurate.
Yeah, it's factually incorrect.
But if they're buying it, if kids are buying that thing, like Will Conroy, the offensive lineman from St. Ignatius in Ohio, class of 2026, who did not have Ohio State in his top 5, his trainer is LaCharles Bentley, who's one of the greatest players to ever play at Ohio State on the offensive line. He's a center. LaCharles was a center from Ignatius, same as Conroy. And Conroy doesn't have Ohio State in his top 5 because his family doesn't think Ohio State develops offensive linemen. Like, if that's what you believe, I don't know why Ohio State is struggling to articulate that, because clearly they have 10 current offensive linemen in the NFL, which I think is 4th among college programs. Like, they obviously just had 2 rookies starting. DeJuan Jones would have started 15 games last year if he didn't get hurt. And Paris Johnson's a starter. Like, they're going to have 3 guys drafted out of this current group, maybe 4 if we count Seth McLaughlin. Like, I'm not sure why they can't seem to get people to understand that there actually are developing guys. If you look at just Josh Simmons alone, like the leap that he took from where he was going to be if he stayed at San Diego State to where he's going to be now next fall is insane. Like, Justin Fry should get credit for that, but he's not getting credit for it. And people are just not believing that he's able to get it done. And I just don't know why.
I think you can maybe poke some holes in Justin Fry's development resume.
Sure.
Like UCLA didn't have much to speak of. And like, how much credit do you give Justin Fry for Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones? I don't know. You give him some, right? But if people are recruiting against Ohio State and they say, oh, I was a previous O-line coach, like, I think that's a pretty easy message to sell or twist kind of in your favor if you want to do that. So like, it is important, I think, what a guy like Josh Simmons does, or Josh Fryer, if Seth McLaughlin can have a bounce back from a pretty bad season last year at Alabama to have a pretty good one at Ohio State. Like, those would all be feathers, I think, in Justin Fry's cap. But I don't know if you just think of like the individual coach. I don't know what you point to. Program, yes. Program, you're right. Program has 2 Remington trophies in Will Conroy's lifetime, right? Like, you should be able to sell that. But individual,
including
coach,
the guy training
not so
him.
much. Including 3.
Well, yeah.
Well, I don't know how old Will Conroy is.
Right. That wasn't in his
lifetime.
lifetime. That's true.
Yeah, I'm talking Pat Elflein and Billy Price. But individual coach, I think is a little harder of a resume to sell. I think Justin Fry needs to pick it up a little bit. If Ohio State wants kids to believe that Justin Fry is the guy to get elite high school players to become elite college players and then send them off to be elite pro players, I think they have some work to do, because I don't know that you can sell that 100% just yet.
No, which is fair. I think there's a little bit of the argument about that gets circled around Larry Johnson here. Like, when you have 5-star talents generally speaking, they look good and they develop and they go to the NFL. So Paris Johnson comes in. I guarantee you, and I've had these conversations with people in that camp, Justin Fry gets a lot of credit for making Paris Johnson better. DeJuan Jones will give Justin Fry a ton of credit for his improvement. But
that's why they just need to put DeJuan Jones on the phone and be like, they recruited me as a long-term project. Yes, that was to a previous offensive line coach or a previous regime, but Mickey Marotti was here. Mark Pantoni was here. The people that worked on my nutrition plan for every single year were here. They changed my body. And at the end, Justin Fry was my position coach.
Yeah, like, well, I mean, in this case,
prime example of that.
Yeah. In this case, Paris Johnson was and his mother were very involved in the David Sanders recruitment because of that reason. So like those conversations were had. I think sometimes we will beat to death these topics. And what it comes down to is the kid wanted something else. And like Ohio State has to do a better job of convincing kids they don't want something else. I just don't know. Justin Fry is not a super in your face, constantly calling you, texting you, emailing you, woofing you, whatever, everyday type of guy. Like that's not who he is. And maybe they need to do that. I mean, if you think about the way that like Mario Cristobal, his reputation as an offensive line recruiter before he became a head coach, like he's aggressive. Everyone knows that. So Sam Pittman, when he was at Georgia, that's how he was like, but it's a lot easier when you have 75 of these dudes in your backyard. So, you know, we've already talked on Talking Stuff and other shows before, but Ohio State is going to have a chance in the class of 2026 to have a very Ohio heavy offensive line group, which is ideal because that's what you want. But again, already starting with Conroy, not including them in his current top 5, looking elsewhere. I mean, he has Arizona State on his list for Pete's sake. So like it's not clearly it's not just about development, but there are other things involved. Justin Fry, I think, does need to be much better about showing kids like how that they're a priority to him, even if they are not at the top of the national recruiting rankings, which he does a very good job with. But in those instances, you're fighting everyone in the country that for 1 or 2 players. He needs to do a better job of connecting on the local level. But I don't think that it's like a fireable offense to not hire or not to land David Sanders. I think that 6 months ago, nobody thought Ohio State had a chance in hell to land David Sanders. And so I think if you look at this class with Carter Lowe, with Jake Cook, if the Buckeyes still ended up with Javen McFadden, a high 4-star offensive lineman from Washington or Washington, D.C., and if they can find a way to keep chipping away at Micah DeBose and maybe actually flip him back from Alabama, which there are some people who think they could, like that 4-man class would be really, really good. And so I don't think people would have a huge complaint about it when it was all said and done. But these moments and just the piling on, if you look at Brandon Baker last year and Jordan Seaton and now this, people are just, you just got to win one of these somehow. And like if everything Ohio State put into this recruitment resource wise and what they were willing to do from an NIL perspective doesn't win, I don't like that's unsettling.
Well, if you were hoping to just feel really good about Ohio State because of this great group of captains and Cody Simon,
it's number 1 class in the country, though,
and being within 12 days of the season opener, sorry, because this took a turn somewhere else. A little melancholy Monday from Berm, but
I'm not melancholy. I understand. I'm fine with it. Like it sucks, but you know, I don't think. And Bill, I want your opinion about this before we wrap up here. Should Ohio State ever offer players that it isn't convinced can play at Ohio State?
No, I don't think that's true. I don't think they should. I think it's harder with offensive linemen to kind of project that developmental arc. And I'm not saying they should load up with like 3-star guys either. I think they need to pound the pavement a little more to try to find guys who might be less obvious candidates to play here in the future. I think that's part of the problem.
And I think that the expansion to 105 scholarships is going to make that easier in the future on the offensive line. I think you're going to be able to offer more developmental players at the offensive line because it's not going to hurt you as bad.
That's probably right. I'm sure we'll talk about that and a lot more later on today.
We get to talk to Justin Fry on what, Tuesday?
No, he is Thursday. He's the closer for availability with the coaching
Apparently
staff. Oof, sorry. Oof. Okay. Yeah, I walked right into that one. Here's what's happening later on. We're going to be at Roosters. That is going to be around 11. If you want to come hang out on Henderson Road, please feel free. We have availability on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night with the remaining position groups. So we'll have snap judgments and coverage of that. However, if we can stream some of that, we will. Ryan Day is going to talk again on Thursday. We'll get as much information and insight as we can from the Buckeyes in this last week of training camp before they get ready for game week, which will be next week as we get even closer. So that's what we've got coming. Bill and Doug have some stuff with Kings going on as well. You're not going to want to miss that as they get ramped up ahead of the season opener. And then Berm will have way more thoughts on recruiting. I promise you, he will. He's got plenty of them that we dove into just on one player on the offensive line right now. But thanks for joining us for this episode on a Monday of the Podcast Daily. That's Bill and Berm, and I'm Austin. We'll see you later.